these bets though as well. First game up here, man. It's all business here on the show. Going to the streets of Washington D.C. Here, we have the Wizards laying a point and a half at the house versus the Pelicans in this one. Shark, they do have the major rest advantage. Pelicans somewhat dropping off a cliff, man. Lost 4 of the last 5. Somewhat up against top tier teams though. You could argue that the Wizards are not a top tier team. They have won 5 straight. Now they've dropped 2 straight. Major rest advantage. I feel like that's the only reason why they're favored here though. Do you think the Pelicans can bring that show on the road, or do you think they continue struggling here, my guy?
Yeah, I think there's actually a ton of reasons as to why they're favored. If you really go through this, and we'll talk about it. I got a ton of notes here. And there's a lot of angles on both games. But as you mentioned, New Orleans Pelicans have been the 1 seed in the West for a period of time. They've flirted. They've come back and forth. They've clustered left, right, and center throughout the entire season. Right now, they are in a bit of a downward play, and they are 1-4 straight up last 5. But I think situationally, we really have to look at how they've functioned at the East this year. They are 3-3 ATS at the East, but going game by game, those wins, in my opinion, are not very impressive. You have to go back to the opener against Brooklyn, a blowout win, a game we did have correct on that day in October. But everybody remembers Brooklyn before the Jacques Vaughn transition point was absolutely horrendous in their home gym. So that was much more on Brooklyn being useless. Then they hammered Charlotte, who we know has been awful all year, and they did win a game and cover in Chicago, who's also been lackluster playing at home against the West. Who has not been lackluster at home against the West? The Washington Wizards. And you really start to go through their schedule at home. They've played a big schedule at home against the West. They're 5-3 ATS at home against the West. And I think very impressively, they are 2-0 ATS within the Southwest. Outright win against Dallas, 113-105. And a very specific corollary spot, outright win against Memphis on a -1.5, the same exact figure. Going back to New Orleans for a half second, New Orleans has played 2 games at the Southeast. I think the line is telling us a good story here. As a favorite, they are 1-0 ATS. At Charlotte, we had that correctly in October as well, 124-112 as a -6.5. Slightly later on, the only time they were a dog in this environment, similar line, -1, 1.5 Atlanta. Atlanta did win the game in overtime, 124-121. Final point here as I bring the buy hat for the first time in the history of this broadcast, Jay. Just got this one, and we love to see it. Washington at home as a small favorite is 2-1 ATS versus the West. As I mentioned, 102-92 against Memphis, win and cover. More specifically, off a road loss against Minnesota on a Monday night, I should add, win 142-127. And the only loss in this cluster was a Sunday home game against the Lakers, which was a brutal travel spot for the Wizards. They had a couple road games, came home for one, going back on the road. I'll throw it back to you for some comments. We're looking with major significance here.
Yeah, me personally, I was looking at Pelicans early in this one. They've dropped the last couple games. Top competition at Memphis, at Philly, at home versus Brooklyn, which are all 3 top-tier teams, and then the Mavs as well in a horrible spot. So, like I say, this is third game in 4 nights, 4th and 6. I wouldn't be surprised if Wizards got there early. This is their first game back at the house off a 4-game road trip. Like I say, after dropping the past couple, you get smacked by 17 versus OKC. That really kind of tells you the direction that the Wizards are going, in my opinion. I could only look towards the Pelicans early here. I'll be honest, I do think the full game is a bit of a toss-up, but I'd lean Pelicans early here. Usually what we see when teams come home off their road trip as well, they come out really sluggish as well. Like I say, this Pelicans team, the defense is top tier. The offense is a little bit, they're starting to miss Zion a little bit, but the defense is absolute top tier. And what the Washington Wizards like to do, they like to run and gun and score a bunch of points versus teams that don't like to play defense. That's not the Pelicans here. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised to see them get back on track, even that they're at the rest advantage. But I'd be looking at Pelicans in the first quarter, possibly first half as well.